from from
Okay.
yeah. Okay. Hello everyone. We are today here to listen Yi Wan about the cross-national inequalities in library and information science conferences participations. Yi Wan is a PhD candidate from University of South Carolina, and she is working on information behaviors of scholars working on library and information science and the inequalities of conference participations. We are ready to hear the inequalities for in conference participations and possible solutions for this question, this problem. Yi Wan, the floor is yours, and we are ready for your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for your introduction, Dr. Tasking. And I'm very glad to have the opportunity to meet you all and share my ideas with you all today. So you may found out in the flyer of this webinar. The flyer mentions that I met Dr. Dugan at iConference earlier this year. So I was impressed by her research because as an international student from a developing country, but stayed in the US for almost 2 years, I have the opportunity to observe the gap, the underrepresentation and the inequity of non-Western researchers in LIS conferences. So the presentation is not just about the existing research, the data of the cross-national inequity in LIS conferences, but also my personal experiences and struggles trying to engage in the Western academic world. Academic conferences are a space for exchanging ideas and meeting interesting people. As many of you, I really had good times at conferences. The presentations gave me ideas for research and help me broaden my knowledge in fields I'm not familiar with, and also ideas for professional development. Another important function of conferences is networking with colleagues, journal editors, sponsors, and non-academic stakeholders, which may also generate new research ideas and projects. ILS conferences also can provide emotional support for attendees by valuing their contribution to the field and creating a positive climate. So personally, I attended a conference this year, which named the Joint Conference of Librarians of Color, which is not related to my research interests at all, but I got many insights of the race justice advocacy works have been done by those excellent librarians. And I also built network with Chinese American Librarians Association because of the conference. And more importantly, I was deeply touched by those librarians' passion to contribute to social justice and really tried to make the world better, which made me feel so good of being one part of them. Today, more and more conferences in library and information science try to attract more international and diverse attendance. But the gate of getting insight from international conferences is not open to every researcher. The internationalization of academic conferences oriented towards those both can afford and are permitted to gain entry to developed countries, excluding non-Western researchers from international LIS conferences reinforce the ignorance of problems and wisdoms in non-Western countries. The trade not only hinders LIS researchers' efforts for decolonizing the knowledge production process, but also challenges the faith of knowledge as a public good. So when we look at the history of some big international events in our field, like iConference and IFLA, World Library and Information Congress, we will find that many of them were located in Western countries, which is not too surprised. Like since 2005, 18 iConferences have been held, and 11 of them were in the US, 4 were in Europe, and 1 was in Canada. And for the longer history, IFLA WLIC, most of them were held in Western countries like the US, France, Sweden, Canada, and the UK. So we might ask, why does the location matters? Some researchers pointed out that location within the same continent as the country hosting conferences is significant and substantive positive effect on numbers of participants. For example, the physical event of iConference 2023 was held in Barcelona, Spain. So 82% of the studies presented at the event were led by researchers from institutions in Western countries, include the US, European countries, and Australia and New Zealand, as you can see on the chart. Then the further question is why these countries can dominate the iConference 2023. So the most obvious reason is very simple. Attending international conference is expensive. Although knowledge is a public good, getting insights has its price. Actually, I did this presentation in my class before, but it was a simplified version. But anyway, when my classmate asked me how I came up with the idea, I said I paid $100 for it. I was joking, but it's partially true because if I didn't have the money to pay for the registration fee for iConference, I would not know Dr. Dugan and get insights from her presentation. The case for in-person conferences will be much more complex and expensive. We not only need to pay for the registration fee, but also the flight ticket, hotel, and food, and etc. I also did some research on the cost of attending IFLA WLIC and Assist Avenue conferences in the recent years. I only listed the registration fees here, but we need to keep in mind that at least for conferences in the US and China I have been attended, we need to pay for 3 stars or 4 stars hotel and buy the flight tickets to those places. So Martin stated that contemporary, I'm reading the slides. Contemporary conferences in North America are dominated by convention centers, hotels, airlines, food, dessert, and expensive restaurants. And the marketing of places and expenses experience as if they were tourist destination and we were tourists, which is very true for me from my experience. So some people may think, okay, I know it's kind of expensive, but my institution will cover that, or like my grant will cover that. It might be much easier for researchers working or studying in richer country. As Dr. Dugan and her colleagues' paper indicated that the cost of attending the iConference 2023 physical event is at least as much as GDP per capita for 40 low or lower middle income countries, primarily in sub-Sahara regions. Meanwhile, the cost is less than 5% of GDP per capita in 33 countries in North America or Europe. The financial cost of attending international conferences is a big barrier for researchers in developing countries, PhD or master students, and early career faculty without funding. Another ticket for non-Western researchers to get to international conferences is visa. And so visa is an official document giving permission from a foreigner authority for travelers to enter a country. The visa limitation mostly impacts the lower income and lower middle income countries. Researchers with an US passport can go to 144 countries and territories without a visa. Most developed countries are on the list, like the UK, Canada, and Australia. But most Western countries, which are primarily hosts of international conferences, require a visa from researchers hold a Chinese passport. Applying for a visa not only will cost extra money to go to an international conference, it also increases the uncertainty for non-Western researchers to attend the conference due to the changing political dynamics between different countries, which is very obvious during the COVID. So the dominated position of English-speaking countries in international conferences decides that researchers need to be fluent in speaking English to present their ideas in front of a bunch of English-speaking colleagues. The norm excludes scholars primarily using their native language to do research. But speaking English is not enough. I was wondering how many of you had awkward moments at international conferences. I do have some experience. When I was at ACES Avenue conference last year, everything was good. The presentation were good. My presentation was good. People were super nice. The organizer of the event provides free lunch for all attendants. So I shared a table with people I didn't know at all. So they were talking to each other. But as a non-native English speaker, I found it was hard to join the conversation because I didn't know much about their states, their institutions, and the local culture. So I just finished my food and ran. I mean, people were nice at conferences, but the cultural barriers, which could be presented by the language barrier, could be an invisible wall to limit us making connections with researchers from other countries. So increasing the diversity in international conferences will not only benefit researchers in non-Western countries, but will also benefit LIS as a subject. Behind the cross-national inequity in LIS conference participation is the long existing colonialism in this field. So colonialism refers to the promotion of dominated group ideologies, beliefs, and cultural practices for the purpose of maintaining center position of cultural, social, and economic capital. the dominated position of Western countries in LIS can be found from publications to epistemology. The scholarly publishing system is owned primarily in Western countries and edited and referred by scholars in the globe north. At the meantime, the current quantified evaluation criteria widely adopted by the academic world, like the citation counts, the high index score, reinforce the centralization of Western countries in academia, because researchers around the world submit papers to top journals and conferences, which are primarily originated from Western country. And we cite references from high index resources, which are usually wrote by Western scholars, and applied Western approaches to conduct research and wrote in English to please the editors in Western country to sit by the table of academia. The colonialism and quantified criteria intertrend and decide what is knowledge, what should be valued, and the way of knowing. However, the epistemology is limiting our understanding of the world we're living, because the dominated groups usually are limited in their narrow view of interests and experiences. The fundamental values of the profession, which is librarianship here, encompassing human rights, equalities, and diversity, preservation and continuity of access to knowledge, intellectual freedom align strongly with seeking to address epistemic injustice, excluding Western researchers from international conferences is also a betrayal of the vocation of librarianship, since it's the opposite of equity, diversity, and intellectual freedom. Researchers are not the authority of knowledge anymore, as the subjectivity gradually comes to the center of social science. Instead, we are translators of our community's problems and wisdom to international audience. Limiting non-Western researchers' access to international LIS conferences can hinder the knowledge production process globally. International conferences should be a space for passing on decolonized Western, which might not be regarded as knowledge in traditional Western values. So we may ask, is there any way to increase the equity in international LIS conference? The key to better LIS conferences may be decentralizing the dominant position in Western countries. Virtual conferences saw a big increase and success during COVID, which can be a new norm in academia. Virtual events can efficiently decrease the financial and visa barriers facing researchers from low-income countries. LIS conference organizers should include virtual options in the conference design stage and promote the virtual conferences to researchers worldwide. Virtual access can be facilitated through live streaming, like what we're doing, and asynchronous presentations and the online communication to improve access to LIS conferences. These approaches were adopted in the iConference 2023. The registration fee for the virtual event starts from $25 for bachelor students. Moreover, it also invites presenters to record their presentations for asynchronous access. As a result, the virtual event had more diverse participation with voices from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, through researchers from US institutions still dominated the conference. At the same time, we should recognize that many regions and countries may not have stable internet access, or they may face another digital gap, a digital divide, like a lack of ICT equipment. But going virtual might be the first step to go to make LIS conferences become more inclusive. Other things we can do include launch scholarships for researchers from low-income countries, creating new criteria for locating international LIS conferences. So many LIS conferences in the US provide scholarships for researchers from marginalized communities, such as APSCO AIA Avenue Conference Scholarship, which values $1,000, and Code for Lab National Conference Diversity Scholarship, which values $1,500. Although these scholarships encourage international applicants, but it's very obviously this scholarship is not enough for an international travel. International professional associations and big academic publishers like Aswell and Springer, who usually are sponsors for international conferences, may launch policies to encourage researchers in low-income countries to attend international conferences. And the criteria of locating an international LIS conferences remain a mystery. For example, the conference organization still cannot be found in the IFLA statutes. International LIS affiliations may need to develop more specific policies for event design, like how we choose the location of a conference and what is the specific criteria. The policy also should encourage members in non-Western countries to host international conferences and provide essential support. However, I have one final thought on this. Is like the most radical purpose why we have to put academic conferences at the center of academic communication, why we cannot facilitate everyday communication with researchers from different countries with ICTs or other way, why we have to put ourselves in a small room and listen to each other just at the specific time, specific location. So is there any way we can break the wall between different countries? So I think the scholarly communication network is actually doing this. Like you are challenging like the central position of Western country, like why we have to go to conferences. We can do like daily based or like weekly based, monthly based communication with like low cost. I think it's like very fantastic work. And here's just some wrap up of the presentation today. So as we know, international conferences are very important for LIS or like any field. But the gate to getting insights from international LIS conferences is not open to every researcher, especially for researchers in non-Western countries. And the barriers to international ILS conferences include cost, visa, and language, which are rooted in colonialism in ILS. And limiting non-Western researchers' access to international conferences limits our opportunities to get decolonized Western. And through the position of international conferences is questionable, but facilitates the virtual access to international conferences might be the first step to go to create a more inclusive climate in our field. And that's it. Please feel free to ask if you have any questions. And I know most of you are like earlier career faculty, and I'm just a PhD student, so I'm really looking forward to hear what you think about and share your experience, which will be very beneficial for me for my career development. And you can also find me with my email address and my personal website after this presentation. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Yi. It is a fantastic presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because everything we want to say, you said all of them, and thank you very much for this fantastic seminar. I have a question for you if you are ready.
Okay, yes.
We all know that young researchers, PhD candidates, early career researchers have the pressure to publish papers, the pressure to find good networks, be a part of these networks, and be a place in these networks. And this is the best way to make it is to attend the conferences. But the current economic conditions of some countries like mine, or maybe most of the peripheral countries, have challenges to access these conferences. And there are alternatives for these conferences, like questionable conferences, predatory conferences. They are cheaper, they are easy to access, they are organized in very accessible places like Dubai or Turkey or I don't know, but they are organized in a hub, in the hub countries, and that anyone can access easily. So how can we blame young researchers to attend these questionable conferences to find the networks? What can we do to change this environment for them? Because as Scholarly Communication Network, our mission, our aim is to change the atmosphere, the environment for young researchers. But we are wondering, what can we provide you to change this situation? Or what can conference organizers do? What can funding agencies do? What can universities do for it?
Okay, so I just like double check. So you was wondering like how like countries can do to attract like more.
What are your expectations from countries, from conferences, from funding agencies to attend the conferences that are important in your field, without considering the accessibility, without considering the place, visa issues, or anything else? What are your expectations?
I do feel like the first thing which is very important for me is the quality of the presentations. Like I need presentations which is really related to my research interest, and I wish I can hear like presentation with very high quality, so that can give me insights. But high quality is a very subjective criteria. And I also looking forward conferences which can facilitate communication among attendants from different countries. It's not just we just talk to English speaker, we don't talk to you, or like they talk to me, but it's just like very like superficial conversation, is not very deep. And of course the I'm thinking, do I care about the environment of the conference? I don't think that's like really matter, but I do wish it will provide me some opportunity to explore like more about a new city. And what do I want? Yeah, and really good organization of the conference, because some conferences just a mess. You can't find the schedule on their website, and all the presentation is like over time. So or sometimes it's organize a lot of topics I'm interested at the same time. So I have to decide which should I go. So it's all about how they design the conference and how they arrange different topics. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, I think we always talk about the attending fees and visa issues, but they are also important, because we go to the conferences to make a networks, but if no one can connect with us, it is impossible to create these networks. So maybe organizing some small seminars or talks for young researchers, it might be a good idea to make them a good environment to talk about everything. Maybe it can provide some opportunity to meet new people for new ideas and so on. Greta, do you have any questions?
Yes, I have a comment. You also talked about virtual alternatives. We met with Yi at iConference 2023. The virtual one, and we had a network in that way. But I don't think that virtual alternatives of the conferences is a good alternative, because as you also said, you don't have the chance to communicate deeply. You present your paper, you talked about that paper, but there is not a coffee break there that you will go deeper. I believe that virtual alternatives of the conferences creates the same diversity, because the nations, the people from the nations that don't have the chance to attend the face-to-face conference meet there, and in there is a diverse group that created from the ones from the countries that cannot be able to attend the conference, mainly because of the economic issues. Do you agree with this? Yes, they are good alternatives. If iConference doesn't have a virtual alternative, we will not attend there and we will not meet with you.
Yes,
it's a good alternative, but it is not the solution of the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And like maybe many of you have the experience attend both in-person conference and virtual conference. I think the experience is very different. Like for the virtual conference, you just sit in front of your computer and talk, and some people even don't want to open their camera, so you just like talk to the screen. So and for the ISIS I attended, it was an in-person one. So though it's not very success like social networking, but I do feel like collect and people will ask me more questions about my research. But for the virtual one, I just attended the session I'm presenting, not other lectures, because I just feel so tired to sit like several hours in front of a computer. But in in-person conferences, I'm here to do this. I don't need to worry about other work. So I have no choice. I'm here, so I went to your literature. So I learned more from in-person conference. But yeah, I do think virtual conference is a compromise. It's not the solution of the situation. So I really don't know how to solve the problem, but I just know maybe this little step will help us, like, even if it's just a little bit, it's also like a progress.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. The definition of the problem is also very important in this issue. We don't have the chance to solve the problem. It's a very big problem. It's an economic problem. But I think it's the first step to describe the problem, because many people from the Western countries or Central countries don't know that we have a problem about attending the conferences. They ask us about will you attend this meeting or will you attend that meeting? We cannot say that I will attend or I won't attend. We only say that we cannot attend that conferences. So I think it's very important to make people understand our problem about attending conferences, academic conferences.
Yes, I was very impressed when I talked about go to the iConference this year. I said, no, I really can't go to the in-person one because one of the reasons is the funding, and another reason is I need to apply for a visa. Then my American colleagues said, oh, I never applied for a visa to go to Spain. I was like, what are you talking about? You don't need a visa? Then I just look up online and I Googled it. It turns out they only need visa for 5 countries. So they are free to go to everywhere, but it's not the case for us. Yeah. So I was totally shocked. They were shocked as well.
Yeah. And thank you very much, Yi, for this presentation. I'm checking the chat box. Not much questions. And I think it's time for the surprise for Scholarly Communication Network's followers. We are publishing a manifesto on providing equity for scientific events. You can sign it, you can publish it on Twitter, on any other networks. You have accounts, and this will, we are going to make some awareness on this subject, because conference organizers in the Western countries know that we have some troubles, but they don't know how much problems we have. So we want to show them the problem and the possible solutions for them. For example, they are affordable conference fees, scholarships for early career researchers and students, virtual public participations, accessible conference locations, and affordable accommodation. And there are some important bullets in our manifesto, and if you agree with it, please sign it and please share it with your networks and be our voice. And thank you, Yi, for today's fantastic presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I feel so glad to make the connection to the network. I will keep staying in the network. I hope I will see you all in the future.
We hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I know it's like almost 5 p.m. in your place.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I finished the YouTube.